Hey guys, Buffering Game back with another video today for our favorite weapon series, and today we're going to be covering the SCAR H, or the Mark 17 for the Warzone build. So I put a poll out the other day on the channel comparing which one you guys like better, asking for the Odin or the S12 versus the SCAR H, the Mark 17. And as we covered in the Odin video, you guys would have 73% of you preferred the Mark 17 or the SCAR over the Odin in Warzone and multiplayer. And a lot of you guys left some really good loadout suggestions in the comments below that I went through and tried to formulate my best type of SCAR or Mark 17 loadout for Warzone versus solos, as well as playing with trios or even quads. So let's go ahead and jump right into that. We'll compare this to the Odin, see what I feel is a better assault rifle, and then we'll jump into the attachments for this, build it, and get into some gameplay. So go ahead and back out. We'll get right into it. Here's the final design for one of the builds. I have a couple different builds based on the game type you're playing in Warzone. So again, this is a Warzone specific video, but a lot of these builds will hold over to multiplayer minus some attachments. But I will link down below some of the conversions I've done in the past from my favorite loadouts multiplayer for the SCAR H or the Mark 17. So here, what we'll do is we'll back out. First off, we'll cover the solo loadout for the SCAR. So what I'm going to do is strip this down. We'll go ahead and take the camouflage off this weapon, and we're going to start from scratch. So first, we're going to build the solo loadout for the Mark 17. Now, I'm using the Trader blueprint here, but again, I've stripped it down at base, so you have a base SCAR H here you can utilize, and we'll build this from scratch. So you can use this with any SCAR. Some of the cosmetics may change based on the blueprint that you have. So for the muzzle for my solo build, I'm going to just opt for a standard muzzle on this weapon. We're not going to put any special attachments. Typically, I would put a monolithic suppressor on these weapons, or in the case of the S12 or the Odin, we would use a colossal suppressor. But for this weapon, due to the limitations with the ADS speed and how slow the movement speed is, we're going to opt out of the muzzle attachment, specifically because we're in solos. Now, for the barrel, we're going to want that 20-inch barrel on this weapon. The pros here being the damage at range, bullet velocity, and the recoil control. The cons here being the aim down sight speed as well as the movement speed. So this is going to allow us to get maximum damage at range and the recoil control on this weapon, which you absolutely need, specifically in solos, because especially here, the recoil, you really need to hit your shots in those one-on-one engagements. Can't rely on teammates to help you out in fights. So for the Frankensmith options, we're going to go with the Trader option here. If you're using the base SCAR, obviously this is what it would look like. If you have the Fugitive blueprint, which we'll cover in the future, it's just a color change. And then the Trader, we get that Midwest Industries M-Block handguard on the weapon, which looks really nice with this 20-inch barrel. So we'll go ahead and select that for the Trader. Now the laser, we're going to want a tack laser on this. So the pros here, ADS speed, aiming stability, as well as aim walking steadiness. The cons being that the laser is visible to enemies only when you're aiming down sight. So as I've covered in a lot of my videos where I use this, I try and aim at, if I'm aiming through a doorway, I aim on the door frame on the side so my laser isn't visible and giving away my position. Or just be careful about where you're ADSing or pre-aim so your laser is not going to give away your position. But the pros far outweigh the cons. And again, with the slow ADS speed and movement speed on this weapon, this attachment is pretty vital in my opinion. So we'll go ahead and select the tack laser on this weapon. Now for the optic, this is really personal preference. You can go with pretty much any optic. I've tried out a lot with played a lot of games with the 4x flip hybrid, as well as the one that I actually prefer, just because it's 4x. The recoil on this weapon with the 4x seems to be a little bit too hard to control depending on what attachment you have on there. Plus the 4x range on this, not really necessary for the type of engagements that I'm typically engaging in. I may engage at longer range, but that 4x flip sight just seems to take a little extra time to toggle to the holographic sight. So the one that I prefer on a lot of my builds, specifically for Warzone, is that Leopold hammer sight, or the integral hybrid here. So we have the 3x scope on this weapon, as well as the top mounted red dot optic here. So the pros being the reflex scout toggle, as well as the zoom level. We have that 3.25, and we can toggle to the red dot almost instantly. The cons being the ADS speed, but again, we're mitigating that elsewhere. So we'll go ahead and select the integral hybrid, or the Leopold hammer sight. Now for this, we're going to go with the base stock attachment on this weapon, just because we can't afford to utilize any more attachments elsewhere. So we're going to skip out on the stock, the perk, as well as the rear grip. The ammunition, I'm going to go with a 30-round magazine. Typically for solos, you could probably get away with a standard 20, but for a lot of engagements, specifically if somebody has self-revive on there, you're really going to need almost 25 plus rounds to completely clean them up, even with this weapon, with the heavy caliber, with the 7.62 by 51mm NATO. So we'll go ahead and select the 30-round magazine on this weapon. This is going to increase our ammo capacity from 20 to 30. The cons here being the ADS speed and the movement speed. Then for the underbarrel, you could go with something like a Commando foregrip. That way you don't take another hit to the ADS speed. But since we have that tack laser on there, it's going to help mitigate a lot of that. And this weapon, really, you want to recoil control the recoil as best as possible. So I specifically like the bipod foregrip on this weapon. So this is in place of the Ranger foregrip only for the SCAR in this game. So this is going to assist with the recoil control, same as with the Ranger foregrip, but we're also going to get the crouch and prone recoil control. So it's going to increase our recoil control if we're in crouch, and specifically more so when we're in prone. The concept being the movement speed as well as the ADS speed. But again, we're mitigating that elsewhere, especially with the tac laser on the weapon. So we'll go ahead and select that. And then for the camouflages you saw in the beginning, I really like, back to my Battlefield 4 days, I really like a woodland camo on this for the modern woodland camo. Just gives it a nice sleek look, and I really like the way this SCAR looks with that camouflage, as well as the attachments. We have that M-LOK handguard from Midwest Industries on here. So this is the final design for the solo build of this weapon. And once we get into the gameplay, you'll see a mix of this as well as the one that I'm using in squads or trios. But this is my solo build. Again, no suppressor on there. You're typically in one-on-one engagements. The key to this is to stick and move when you're engaging. So if you're engaging, obviously you're going to show up on the minimap because you don't have a suppressor on the weapon. So stick and move. You basically want to, when you're shooting down an enemy, or if you're missing your target, you want to get out of that area and just reposition, because your enemies are going to typically mark where you are or see where that red dot is and come running. So if you're able to reposition, you can catch people coming in or even get better position on whoever you were engaging prior. So this is, again, my solo build for the Mark 17 or the SCAR H, utilizing that M-LOK handguard. We have a tac laser, and aesthetically this is a really nice looking gun. I really love the Trader blueprint for the M-LOK handguard on this from Midwest Industries. It really looks nice and completes this weapon. I really prefer this particular build cosmetically and aesthetically versus the standard 20-inch barrel we see on the base SCAR in game. So that is our solo build. Go ahead and back out, and now we're going to cover the build that I utilize mainly for squads as well as trios. So I'll go back in, and we'll actually just start with the base SCAR for this, in case you don't have any of these blueprints. So for the muzzle, for this one, I'm actually going to utilize a monolithic suppressor, as I said before, which we opted out for the solo. But for this one, we're going to assist us with the sound suppression as well as the damage at range. The cons here being the ADS speed as well as the aim walking steadiness. So this is going to, again, maximize damage at range, and you'll see why we're doing that specifically with this build in a second. So we'll go ahead and select that. Now the barrel, we're actually going to keep a standard barrel on this. Another option would be a 17.2 as well as a 20-inch barrel. But the way I'm utilizing my attachments, and specifically because I'm playing with other players, I'm not going to need to be engaging at longer range as well as close quarters. I'm trying to utilize, or at least build, a medium to closer range engagement SCAR here, and I can also tap fire for longer range with that monolithic suppressor. So we'll leave the base barrel. Laser, again, we're going to go with a tac laser on this weapon, and then in the optic, again, personal preference here, I like the integral hybrid or the Leopold hammer because we can toggle between the 3.25 and the red dot pretty quickly and get shots on target. Stock, again, we're going to leave blank. Same with perk and rear grip. Now, ammunition, again, I'm going to go with a 30-round magazine. Specifically here, you're absolutely going to need it because you're playing with either trios or quads. You're going to need that extra ammo no matter what to engage multiple targets. Now, the underbarrel, we're going to go ahead again with the bipod foregrip for the same reasons. And you'll see in the gameplay, I'll be hitting targets in crouch as well as prone on some occasions just to help mitigate the recoil on this. Because we're using the base barrel on this weapon, the recoil is going to be a little bit harder to handle, especially at range. So there we go. We put our modern woodland camo on there, and this is the SCAR H or the Mark 17 build that I like to use in trios as well as quads. Now, there's a couple different options here that you could utilize here. You could also do something for, if you wanted to use the 20-inch barrel to engage with longer targets, you could go ahead and opt for the 20-inch barrel. The only downside here is you have to pick whether you want the bipod foregrip gone, the 30-round to a 20-round, or even the tac laser. So in this case, I would actually probably choose either the 30-round magazine or the tac laser to remove, and that'll give you still really good recoil control with that bipod foregrip. I feel like it's very necessary with this weapon because of the rate of fire and the recoil on the weapon. You really need to be able to control it with a bipod foregrip or the Ranger foregrip, which has changed here for the SCAR. And the pros and cons, you're able to crouch and go prone and get shots on target much better and really help mitigate that recoil. So I need to really play with these both a little bit more to compare the Odin as well as the SCAR and see which is really better. They both fit their own niche pretty well. And I think with the Odin, you're able to, you have the heavier caliber, the 12.7 by 55 millimeter, almost essentially a 50 caliber round that's going to down people very quickly if you're hitting your targets, and the slower rate of fire is easier to get to make corrections with your recoil and get shots on target. With the SCAR, with a faster rate of fire in that 7.62mm round, the faster rate of fire actually kind of works against this weapon and makes it a little bit harder to keep shots on target, specifically at ranges. So really need to get a little bit more time with these weapons, but to see which one I prefer. Again, they really both fit their own niche pretty well. The SCAR, the good thing here, especially in CQC, it can really a more versatile weapon, I feel, overall, but I can't really pick one quite yet. I'll do another future video on that. But here for the SCAR, again, we have the different builds for the solo as well as the trios and quads. Let me know what you guys think of your ideal build for the SCAR. I know we got a lot of feedback in the chat for the comment section here, as well as the previous videos I've done as far as what loadouts you guys like to run with the SCAR. So if you're using this in Warzone, let me know what kind of attachments you run on this. I did watch a couple of videos after I shot this gameplay to see what some other folks were using out there, and I saw some builds from Korean Savage and some other folks who were using a little bit different builds, mainly without an optic on the weapon. And I feel for this weapon, the optic really helps, especially with an integral hybrid here, where you can toggle from the 3.25 or even something like a 4x flip, so you can utilize that 20-inch barrel more effectively. There's a lot of occasions here. I know we covered in the past the Mark 20 SSR and compared that to some other weapons for a DMR. But this weapon here, if you're using a 20-inch barrel, you essentially have an assault rifle and a DMR. You're able to select fire to single fire or even just tap fire at ranges and really take out targets. You'll see me do it in a couple of the gameplay clips here, specifically with the 20-inch barrel. But even with the standard barrel here, again, if you're just picking your targets and tap firing or even select firing to single fire, you'll be able to down players at a pretty decent range as well. And that, again, that bipod foregrip really helps mitigate the recoil, especially if you're in crouch or prone, to get shots on target. And this weapon actually does have a very fast rate of fire given the size of the round. So I really like this weapon. Let me know, again, what you guys think of it overall down below. This is definitely one of my favorite weapons in Warzone. Now, is it the best? I would say no, because you're still going to have your meta weapons out there like the Grau, the M4, the M13, and even something like the Ram 7 that are faster firing weapons with lower recoil and not too high of a skill gap, I guess, to use them. You see, I guess, a lot of people, I ran to a lot of people when I was using the Odin as well as the SCAR here, who are running those meta classes with, you had the Graus with no stocks and those type of builds with the purple camos and all that, Damascus and stuff. But I would say it was very satisfying to take people out with the Odin and the SCAR here. People that had those M4s, the M13s, and the Graus using this SCAR, because people don't expect it. It hits really hard, and again, you can even be very effective at range if you have this bipod foregrip and just go into the crouch or even the prone position. And depending on which barrel you have, you just need to know what your range is for engagements. When to rip full auto, when to tap fire. You can even tap fire into a burst pattern. This weapon, I think, might have a burst perk on it. I don't recall, but if you're tap firing at a range, the recoil for this really goes straight vertical, and then it starts to kick to the right. So if you're tap firing a 3 or even a 2-round burst at longer ranges, it's really going to help you mitigate that recoil. But again, if you're going extreme long ranges, you can definitely tap fire this or select fire to single and still take out enemies no matter what the barrel length is. So definitely a really good gun. And I've won, I believe, overall 4 games with this just in the 2 days I've been playing with it. It took me a while to find what specific build really worked for me. But let me know down below what you guys think of these builds. Do you agree with the builds that I did here for solos as well as trios and quads? Do you have different ideas and attachments that you prefer to run in-game? Let me know what you guys think. I want to hear from you. And then we'll get into a future video comparing this, the Mark 17, to the Odin or the Ash 12 and see which one is better. Again, they fill very particular roles, so I'm going to have to get some more game time with both of them to see which I prefer better. But again, the SCAR, very versatile. I highly recommend some of these loadouts. Don't expect to win every gunfight. You really need to be very tactical about your engagements for this weapon. I try and put myself on cover as much as possible, but I've definitely been out in the open and engaged enemies without cover and come out and win some gunfights. So especially in the end game, this thing definitely helps with close range and longer range. You're able to drop people very quick with that 7.62mm round. So again, let me know down below what you guys think. This is the Mark 17 favorite weapon build for Warzone. Until next time, Buffer Gaming.